For years, we've heard that the Israelis want to make peace with the Palestinians and is ready to move forward with the two-state solution. But is that the truth? In late 2021, President Trump did an interview with Axios in which he highlighted it was Netanyahu who did not want to make peace with the Palestinians and move forward with the Oslo Agreement. Also, how David Friedman, Trump's ambassador to Israel, played a pivotal role in shifting the President Trump's view. After President Trump had an interview with the Palestinian leader Mohammed Abbas in which the president spoke highly of him, to which Friedman was displeased. He began to influence the president's thinking, sowing doubt and misrepresenting Mohammed Abbas's intentions. Trump risked disaster with Abbas, praised in key Israel meeting, ambassador says. So this was David Friedman who wrote a book in which he highlighted how he shifted President Trump's view on Israel. Meeting then Israeli President Rivlin in Jerusalem in May 2017, Donald Trump stunned advisors by criticizing the then Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for being unwilling to seek peace while Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian leader, was desperate for a deal. So Mahmoud Abbas was ready to make a deal, it was just Netanyahu who was not proceeding to make a deal. Although the meeting was private and off the record, we all envisioned a headline tomorrow that Trump had praised Abbas and criticized Netanyahu, the worst possible dynamic for a president's popularity or for the prospect of the peace process. Fortunately and incredibly, the event wasn't leaked. Friedman describes how, during Trump's next meeting with Netanyahu, he maneuvered all present into viewing a 2-minute collection of Abbas's speeches that I thought was worth watching. The tape contained 2 minutes of Abbas honoring terrorists, extolling violence, and vowing never to accept anything less than Israel's total defeat. After the tape ended, Friedman writes, "The president said, 'Wow, is that the same guy I met in Washington last month? He seemed like such a sweet, peaceful guy.' The tape had clearly made an impact." Friedman writes that he was rebuked by Rex Tillerson, Trump's first Secretary of State, and H.R. McMaster, Trump's second national security advisor. They thought it was a cheap propaganda trick, he writes. He told them, "I work for the president and nobody else. I'm going to make sure that he is well informed so that he gets Israel's policy right." Friedman emphasizes his role in such policy prominently including closeness to Netanyahu, support for Israeli settlers on Palestinian land, cutting aid to Palestinians, recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moving the US embassy there, and the diplomacy that led to the Abraham Accords and the normalization of Israeli relations with 4 Arab countries. So David Friedman emphasizes how he changed President Trump's view on Mohammed Abbas because he was displeased with how the meeting between President Trump and Mohammed Abbas went. So he began to influence the president's thinking and misrepresenting Mohammed Abbas's intention because he was not happy of how the meeting went about. Now President Trump highlights it was Netanyahu who never wanted to make peace in 2017 when President Trump met with Mohammed Abbas, the Palestinian leader. And when President Trump had asked Netanyahu if he wanted to make peace with the Palestinians, Netanyahu hesitated. Trump says Netanyahu never wanted peace with the Palestinians. Trump went from a failed Middle East peace plan to a 4 normalization deals between Israel and Arab states within the span of one chaotic tension-filled year. This behind-the-scenes account of how that happened is based on an interview with Trump of nearly all of the other key players. "I don't think Bibi ever wanted to make peace," Trump told me in April, referring to Netanyahu by his nickname in a 90-minute face-to-face interview for the new book, Trump's Peace, the Abraham Accords, and Reshaping the Middle East. "I think he just tapped us along, just tap, you know." Trump presented a peace plan in January 2020 that was the most favorable proposal for Israel that any US president had made since the Madrid Peace Conference in 1991. Nevertheless, like the 2 predecessors who worked on this issue with Netanyahu, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, Trump reached the conclusion that Netanyahu never sincerely wanted to negotiate a 2-state solution. During the 2016 presidential election, Trump spoke several times about his eagerness to make the mother of all deals, to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. "I have been told by everybody that it's not doable. Sheldon Adelson said it's not doable," Trump said, referring to the late Republican megadonor, whom he referenced repeatedly in our interview when discussing his Middle East policy. So this is Sheldon Adelson, who was Trump's biggest donor during his 2016 election. "The hatred is so great between the Palestinians and the Israelis. They learned from the first day to hate each other, especially the Palestinians toward Israel," Trump claimed. And Sheldon was a great deal maker. He said it's impossible. Trump said that at an early age of his presidency, he realized that Netanyahu would be a bigger obstacle to peace than the Palestinian president Mohammed Abbas. Trump said that at an early age of his presidency, he realized that Netanyahu would be a bigger obstacle to peace than the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. I thought he was terrific, Trump told me of Abbas, reflecting on the great first meeting. He was almost like a father, couldn't have been nicer. I thought he wanted to make a deal more than Netanyahu. Abbas told Trump that he thought they could make a deal. Netanyahu urged Trump to wait. My whole life is deals. I'm like one big deal. That's all I do. So I understand it. And after meeting with Bibi for 3 minutes, I stopped Bibi in the middle of her sentence. I said, Bibi, you don't want to make deal, do you? And he said, well. And the fact is, I don't think Bibi ever wanted to make a deal. The reason Trump thought was domestic and Israeli politics. But Trump undermined his own efforts towards a peace deal in December 2017 when he recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital and said the US embassy would move there. Kushner's team worried that this could be a bump on the road to any agreement with the Palestinians, and it could be a far more serious, becoming the worst crisis between the US and the Palestinians at least 15 years. Abbas severed all ties with the Trump administration except on security issues. Trump retaliated by gradually cutting nearly all US financial support for the Palestinians. Trump's decision was mainly political, to fulfill a campaign promise and prove to his evangelical base that he takes steps no other president would. See, one of the key reasons why President Trump moved the US embassy to Jerusalem and annexed the Golan Heights was due to Sheldon Adelson. Sheldon Adelson was Trump's biggest donor in the 2016 election. He donated over $100 million. One of the terms he had donated was that Trump would move the US embassy to Jerusalem and annex the Golan Heights, which Trump did later on. And later, Trump in his rallies reflected upon how Sheldon Adelson would come to the White House and constantly tell Trump to move the embassy and annex the Golan Heights. And he acted further upon it.
Just as I promised, I recognized Israel's eternal capital and opened the American embassy in Jerusalem. Jerusalem became the capital. I also recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. You know, Miriam and Sheldon would come into the White House probably almost more than anybody outside of people that worked there. And they were always after, and as soon as I'd give them something, always for Israel. As soon as I'd give them something, they'd want something else. I'd say, give me a couple of weeks, will you please? But I gave them the Golan Heights, and they never even asked for it. You know, for 72 years, they've been trying to do the Golan Heights, right? And even Sheldon didn't have the nerve. But I said, you know what? I said to David Friedman, give me a quick lesson, like 5 minutes or less on the Golan Heights. And he did. And I said, let's do it. We got it done in about 15 minutes, right?
But in our interview, he struggled to explain why he continually took steps to benefit Netanyahu and harm Abbas, even though he'd initially found Abbas more cooperative. One explanation he offered was that he'd always been told that the Israelis wanted peace, not the Palestinians. Trump also accused Abbas of offering hugs and kisses and wonderful communication behind closed doors, but criticism in public. When he went back home, he didn't say the right things. He said much more like warlike things than what he said to my face. Maybe he felt politically it was good, Trump said, reflecting that he still liked Abbas based on their early interactions. Much of Abbas's inflammatory rhetoric came after Trump's Jerusalem decision. In a speech in January 2018, Abbas cursed Trump in Arabic and said, "May your house be destroyed." Asked whether he could understand the Palestinian anger, Trump said, "We were going to do something for them in a different part of Jerusalem." I said, "Look, Israel just gained a point. The next point is going to be theirs. They're going to get something very big that they want, and I will let them know that." Trump also considered the cutting aid to the Palestinians had not been effective in bringing them back to the negotiating table. "They are hardened people," he said. When Trump finally revealed his Middle East peace plan in January 2020, after more than a year of delays due to a long-running political crisis in Israel, the Palestinians rejected it outright and boycotted the ceremony. Trump invited both Netanyahu and his political rival Benny Gantz to Washington, hoping they'd both back the deal. Trump and Gantz hit it off. I thought he was great, a really impressive guy in my opinion. It would have been much easier to make a deal with the Palestinians with Gantz than with Netanyahu. The Palestinians hate Netanyahu. They did not hate Gantz. It's a big factor. Netanyahu was upset about the timing of Trump's announcement just before yet another Israeli election, and that Gantz got an Oval Office meeting. Still, he couldn't outright say no to Trump. Instead, Netanyahu decided to use Trump's plan as a cover to annex part of the Israeli-occupied West Bank ahead of the elections, an explosive proposal that will violate international law but potentially provide Netanyahu with an electoral landslide. Trump's ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, supported Netanyahu's annexation push and even said publicly that the White House ceremony that Israel could annex right away. But Trump was irritated by Netanyahu's speech at the ceremony. A former senior White House official told me Netanyahu turned the president into a potted plant with a campaign speech instead of reaching out to the Palestinians. After Netanyahu departed, Trump asked his advisors, what the hell was that? When Netanyahu announced the annexation plan later that same day, blindsiding the White House, Trump was livid. I got angry and I stopped it because that was really going too far, Trump told me in our interview. Kushner called Friedman into his office and gave him a dressing down, saying this plan was not what the president wanted. Kushner then made Friedman cross the Pennsylvania Avenue to the Blair House to deliver the bad news to Netanyahu, who was celebrating with his senior advisors. Netanyahu tried to fight it, but within 24 hours, both he and Friedman were walking back on everything they had said on annexation. Netanyahu blamed miscommunication. You see, Netanyahu never wanted to make peace with the Palestinians and move forward with the Oslo Agreement. Netanyahu wants the whole of Palestine. It's not really much about the Gaza that he really cares about, but it's the West Bank that he cares so much. Under Netanyahu's leadership, he continued the illegal settlements of the West Bank and expanded upon them, which has led to widespread international condemnation. Now, this later culminated in an Abraham Accords, the normalization deals between Israel and the 4 Arab countries, brokered by the United States in late 2020. It included countries like Morocco, Bahrain, UAE, and Sudan. These countries established diplomatic, economic, and also cultural ties with Israel. You see, for Yitzhak Rabin's plan was, in order for Israel to make peace with the broader Arab world, they needed to end the occupation in Palestine and give the Palestinians their own state, which will result in Israelis making peace with the broader Arab world. But the Netanyahu doctrine was opposite to that. In 1996, the neoconservative wrote to Benjamin Netanyahu a memo called Clean Break, in which they highlighted what Israel should do is, instead of giving the Palestinians their own land and making peace with the broader Arab world, they should overthrow these governments surrounding Israel and install governments that are pro-Israel and pro-American. Now, which later resulted in the United States invading Iraq, Libya, and also supplying arms and ammunition to the Syrian rebels in Syria's civil war. Now, this plan had not worked out as they had envisioned it. So, in order for Netanyahu to expand on the West Bank and keep the whole of Palestine, they embarked on a new policy, which was the Netanyahu doctrine. Instead of making peace with the Palestinians, what Israel should do is bribe off these Arab countries that are support of the Palestinian cause, overlooking the Palestinians and making normalization deals with the Israelis. So Netanyahu, working with the US, essentially bribed off these Arab countries and overlooking the Palestinian conflict, giving UAE F-35 jets, drones and ammunition, giving Bahrain security assurances, giving Sudan access to international finance and removing them from terror list, and the US recognition of the Western Sahara, and also providing arms deals and economic aid to Morocco. So the US essentially bought them off at the expense of US tax money. Many of these countries did not recognize Israel due to the Palestinian conflict. The Abraham Accords were the culmination of overlooking the Palestinian conflict and making a normalization deals between these Arab countries. So the Netanyahu doctrine was essentially achieved. Now the plan was to continue the Abraham Accord and bring in Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Sunni Gulf states at the expense of not giving the Palestinians their own land. Now in the end, the Abraham Accords may have reshaped the regional diplomacy, but they did not resolve the core issue of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. By bypassing the Palestinian statehood and focusing on strategic, economic and military intervention, the US and Israel under Netanyahu's leadership prioritized normalization between the Arab countries over justice of the Palestinian people. Now, the so-called Netanyahu doctrine may have succeeded in the short term, but its long-term sustainability remains in question. True peace, as history has shown, cannot be built on arms deals and political calculation. It requires justice, dignity, and self-determination for all people to be involved. Until the core issues have been addressed, the normalization between the Arab countries and Israel is a fragile facade.